The ability to be unbothered is not a personality trait you're either born with or without. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be trained. Your brain and body operate as a unified system, and every time you feel irritated, anxious, or reactive, it's because a very old, very fast survival circuit has been activated. This circuit doesn't stop to ask whether the threat is real or imagined. It simply prepares you to fight, flee, or freeze. In our modern world, most of the threats that activate this system are not life or death. They are words, opinions, inconveniences. Yet your nervous system can't tell the difference unless you teach it. Building a buffer between stimulus and response begins with understanding how your nervous system processes information and why it often reacts faster than your conscious awareness can catch up. Every time you encounter a stimulus, whether it's a comment someone makes, a delay in your plans, or an unexpected challenge, your brain instantly interprets it based on past experiences and emotional memory. This interpretation happens in milliseconds, activating parts of the brain like the amygdala, which are responsible for scanning for danger. The problem is that these systems evolved to keep us alive in environments where threats were often physical and immediate. In today's world, most of the threats we face are psychological or social in nature, but the brain still responds with the same level of urgency. This is why you can feel your heart race, your muscles tense, or your breathing change over something as small as a frustrating email. The buffer is the space between that automatic reaction and the action you choose to take. It is the mental and physiological pause that allows your prefrontal cortex to engage, or you say, before do something you might regret. Without a buffer, you're essentially handing over control of your life to whatever emotion rises first. With a buffer, you're in control of your output regardless of the input. Creating this space is not about suppressing emotions or pretending not to feel them. It's about regulating the intensity and timing of your response so that it aligns with your goals rather than your momentary impulses. To build this buffer, you first need awareness. Many people move through life on autopilot, reacting without realizing that they have the option to pause. The practice begins by noticing the earliest signals of activation in your body. This could be a quickening of the breath, a tightening in the jaw, a narrowing of your visual field, or a rush of heat in your chest. These sensations are your cue that the survival circuitry has taken the wheel. The sooner you can detect these changes, the sooner you can step in and slow things down. One of the most powerful tools for interrupting this automatic loop is controlled breathing. When you deliberately slow your breathing rate, especially by extending the exhale, you signal to your autonomic nervous system that the threat level is low. This creates a cascade of effects. Your heart rate begins to normalize, your muscles release some of their tension, and your brain shifts out of a reactive mode. This physical change makes it easier for your mind to access a more rational, deliberate state of thinking. This is the first layer of the buffer, using the body to influence the brain. The second layer is cognitive reframing. Once you've interrupted the automatic physical response, you have the mental bandwidth to reframe the situation. Ask yourself if the stimulus truly warrants the level of energy your body is preparing to spend. Is this situation a real emergency or just an inconvenience? Will it matter in an hour, a week, or a year? This kind of questioning doesn't come naturally in the heat of the moment. It has to be practiced deliberately when you are calm so that it becomes accessible when you are not. Over time, this practice rewires your neural pathways, making it easier for you to default to a measured response rather than an explosive one. Another critical component is attention control. When something triggers you, your mind tends to narrow in on the perceived threat, amplifying its significance. This is a biological mechanism designed to help you focus on danger, but it also makes small problems feel much larger. Expanding your visual field, literally widening your gaze, can reduce the brain's threat perception and help restore perspective. Similarly, shifting your mental focus to a neutral or constructive element in your environment can prevent you from spiraling deeper into a reactive state. The buffer also grows through exposure. You cannot develop the skill of being unbothered if you avoid all situations that test your patience or self-control. In fact, you need to place yourself in controlled, challenging environments where you can practice applying these techniques in real time. This might mean having a difficult conversation while focusing on your breath, deliberately exposing yourself to small daily frustrations without reacting, or engaging in physical training that requires you to stay calm under strain. Each time you successfully apply your tools, you strengthen the neural connections that support the buffer. Over weeks and months, these micro-interventions accumulate. Your baseline reactivity decreases, meaning that fewer things trigger you in the first place. This doesn't mean you stop caring about what happens around you. It means you've raised the threshold for what disrupts your internal state. People might expect you to flare up over something, but instead, they'll see you processing, pausing, and responding with clarity. That pause is the buffer in action, and it communicates strength, composure, and self-control, both to others and to yourself. The long-term payoff of building this buffer is immense. You conserve mental energy that would have been wasted on unproductive reactions. You protect relationships from the collateral damage of impulsive words or actions. You make decisions based on long-term benefits rather than short-term feelings. And perhaps most importantly, you shift from being at the mercy of your environment to being in command of your own state. This is the essence of being unbothered. Not that the world stops trying to provoke you, but that you have trained yourself to respond on your terms. If you commit to this process, the buffer becomes your default mode. Situations that once hijacked your mind and body now pass through a filter that prioritizes your values and objectives. The stimulus still arrives, but it no longer dictates your behavior. You become the architect of your own responses, using physiology, awareness, and deliberate practice to create a life where you are harder to shake and quicker to recover. In a world that constantly demands your attention and reaction, this is not just a personal advantage, it is a form of freedom. Rewiring your nervous system through deliberate practice begins with the recognition that your brain is not fixed. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its structure and function in response to experience, is available to you at any age. The patterns of reactivity and emotional volatility that you may have carried for years are not hardwired. They are habits encoded into neural pathways through repetition. Every time you react quickly to a trigger, you are strengthening the circuits that link stimulus to immediate emotional response. If you want to become unbothered, you must intentionally weaken those circuits and build new ones that favor composure, clarity, and measured action. This is not an abstract idea. It is a biological process that requires consistent, deliberate input. The first step in this rewiring is to create controlled opportunities for practice. The nervous system adapts most when it is challenged just beyond its comfort zone. If you avoid situations that cause discomfort, you deny yourself the very stimulus your brain needs to reconfigure its responses. Instead, you can use these moments as training grounds. For example, deliberately putting yourself in a slow, moving line when you're in a hurry and using that time to practice deep breathing and calm awareness teaches your brain that this type of situation does not require a stress response. Over time, the association between waiting and frustration weakens, and a new association between waiting and calm begins to take hold. The key is repetition. The nervous system learns through frequency and intensity. Occasional attempts at composure will not be enough to rewire a long-standing habit of reactivity. You need to expose yourself to these scenarios consistently, and you need to engage your new tools with enough intensity that your brain takes notice. This might mean exaggerating your calm response, amplifying your breathing control, or deliberately shifting your posture to a relaxed position in moments where you previously tensed up. These physical signals inform your brain that the environment is safe, and the brain adapts its future responses accordingly. Visualization can also be a powerful tool in this process. The brain's motor and emotional circuits activate not only during real experiences, but also during vividly imagined ones. By mentally rehearsing scenarios that typically trigger you and visualizing yourself responding with calm and control, you are priming your nervous system to default to this new pattern when the real situation arises. This is particularly useful for situations that are unpredictable or high stakes, where you may not have frequent opportunities to practice in real life. Each time you run this mental rehearsal, you are strengthening the neural pathways that support your new, unbothered state. Another aspect of deliberate record practice is in that your nervous system is trainable but also energy dependent. If you are chronically sleep deprived, nutritionally depleted, or under constant background stress, your ability to rewire effectively will be compromised. The brain's capacity for change is highest when it is supported by proper rest, movement, and recovery. This means that lifestyle factors are not separate from your training. They are part of the foundation. You cannot expect to maintain composure in the face of challenge if your baseline state is already one of fatigue or agitation. Feedback is also critical to rewiring. The nervous system learns faster when it receives clear signals of success or failure. After each deliberate practice session, whether it's a real-life trigger or a simulated one, reflect on how you responded. If you manage to stay composed, acknowledge the success internally, and even anchor it physically, perhaps by taking a slow, deep breath and noting the feeling of control. If you fell back into old habits, avoid self-criticism and instead analyze what cues you missed or what tools you neglected to use. This process of reflection creates a feedback loop that accelerates the weakening of old pathways and the strengthening of new ones. An often overlooked part of rewiring is the role of small wins. The nervous system is more likely to adopt new patterns when change is gradual and success is frequent. Trying to overhaul every aspect of your reactivity at once can be overwhelming and counterproductive. Instead, choose one specific trigger to work on for a period of time. Maybe it's interruptions during your workday or traffic delays or someone speaking to you in a condescending tone. By focusing on a single, repeatable trigger, you allow your nervous system to concentrate its adaptation in one area until the new pattern is firmly established. Once you've made that trigger less potent, move on to the next. Over months of deliberate practice, something remarkable happens. The brain begins to automate the new response. Just as it once linked a stimulus to frustration or anger without your conscious involvement, it now links that same stimulus to calm and control. This shift doesn't just change your reactions, it changes your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who doesn't get easily rattled, someone who chooses their emotional state rather than having it dictated by external events. This identity shift further reinforces the behavior because your actions naturally align with the way you see yourself. It's important to understand that this process is not about becoming emotionless. Rewiring your nervous system to be unbothered does not mean you no longer feel disappointment, irritation, or sadness. It means you experience these emotions without being controlled by them. You create enough space in your mind and body to observe the emotion, decide how much weight it deserves, and respond in a way that serves you best. The old neural pathways that once bypassed your conscious choice are replaced by ones that route your experience through the part of your brain that considers the bigger picture. When you commit to this process long enough, you realize that the power is not in avoiding challenges, but in facing them with a new set of internal tools. Every trigger becomes an opportunity to reinforce your new circuitry. Every calm response is a signal to your nervous system that you are safe, capable, and in control. Over time, the deliberate becomes natural, and what once required effort becomes effortless. The rewiring is complete not when you never feel provoked, but when provocation no longer dictates your behavior. This is the essence of training yourself to be unbothered, using neuroplasticity intentionally to shape the kind of mind and body that serve you in every environment. Controlling your state in real time using breath, vision, and focus begins with the understanding that your mind follows your body's signals more often than the other way around. When something triggers you, your body reacts first, your heart rate spikes, your breathing quickens, your vision narrows, and then your mind interprets those physical changes as evidence that something is wrong. This sequence is automatic, but it is not unchangeable. If you can take control of the signals your body sends to your brain in the heat of the moment, you can change the way your mind processes the situation. This is why real-time tools are essential. They interrupt the physiological cascade before it locks you into a reactive state. The breath control is the fastest and most accessible tool. The nervous system is directly influenced by your breathing pattern. Rapid, shallow breaths tell your body that you're under threat, while slow, deep, controlled breaths send the opposite message. The most effective pattern for quickly calming the body is to make your exhales longer than your inhales. For example, inhaling through the nose for 4 seconds and exhaling for 6 to 8 seconds engages the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for rest and recovery. This change happens within minutes, often seconds, shifting your internal state toward calm even if the external situation hasn't changed. In moments where you can't control the environment, you can always control your breathing. Vision is another powerful and often overlooked lever for state control. When you're stressed or provoked, your visual field naturally narrows. This tunnel vision is an ancient survival response designed to help you focus on a threat, but in modern contexts, it often makes you feel trapped and overwhelmed. By deliberately expanding your visual field, relaxing your gaze, looking at the horizon, or taking in more of the periphery, you signal to your brain that you're not in immediate danger. This visual expansion reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and allows more access to the prefrontal cortex, where rational decision-making happens. It's a small physical adjustment that can dramatically shift your mental perspective in the middle of a triggering moment. Focus acts as the bridge between breath and vision, directing your attention to what you can control rather than what you can't. In a reactive state, the mind tends to spiral around the source of irritation, replaying it and amplifying it. This is like pouring fuel on the fire. To break the loop, you must consciously choose a different point of attention. This might mean focusing on a physical anchor, like the sensation of your feet on the ground, or shifting to a task that requires cognitive engagement. Even repeating a short, grounding phrase can serve as a focus shift, redirecting mental resources towards stability rather than agitation. This doesn't mean ignoring the situation. It means putting yourself in a position where you can respond from clarity rather than chaos. These tools work best when you practice them outside of high-stakes situations. If you only attempt to control your breath, vision, and focus when you're already overwhelmed, you're asking your nervous system to switch gears under maximum load. The more you rehearse these adjustments in calm conditions, the faster and more effectively you'll be able to use them when it counts. Just like an athlete trains movement patterns until they're automatic, you can train these physiological controls until they become your default response to stress. It's important to understand that using these tools is not about suppressing how you feel. Instead, it's about creating a state in which you can feel everything without being overrun by it. For example, you might still feel irritation when someone interrupts you, but if you slow your breathing, expand your gaze, and shift your focus, the irritation will stay manageable. You'll still have access to your reasoning mind, allowing you to decide how best to respond rather than acting purely on emotion. One of the most valuable aspects of these tools is how portable they are. You can use breath control during a tense meeting without anyone noticing. You can expand your vision while walking down the street, sitting in traffic, or standing in line. You can shift your focus in a conversation simply by directing your attention to a specific detail in the room or on the person's face that has nothing to do with the provocation. This portability makes them reliable because you don't need special conditions to apply them. Over time, the consistent use of breath, vision, and focus not only changes your moment-to-moment reactions, but also shifts your baseline. When your nervous system learns that most situations are not actual threats, it stops priming your body for battle over small disturbances. Your heart rate variability improves, your stress hormone levels normalize more quickly, and your emotional stability becomes harder to shake. This baseline shift is one of the clearest markers of progress in training yourself to be unbothered. It's worth noting that these tools are synergistic. Breath slows the body, vision signals safety to the brain, and focus anchors the mind. Together, they create a feedback loop that reinforces calm. When your body is calm, your vision is open. When your vision is open, your mind is less defensive. When your mind is less defensive, your breath stays steady. The loop works in both directions, which is why intervening at any point, breath, vision, or focus, can disrupt the reactive cycle and restore control. With enough repetition, controlling your state in real time becomes a kind of second nature. You begin to notice that you can move from agitation to calm more quickly, that situations which once derailed your mood now barely register, and that you recover faster from emotional spikes. This doesn't mean you never get triggered. It means the trigger no longer owns you. You have tools that can be applied in seconds, anywhere, anytime, and they work because they align with how your nervous system is built to operate. The mastery of this skill transforms the way you experience the world. Instead of being carried by the momentum of your first emotional reaction, you can pause, adjust your physiology, and choose your mental stance. This is how you take back control, not by forcing yourself to think differently, but by using the body to guide the mind into a state where thinking differently is natural. Over time, this control becomes your default, and staying unbothered stops being a conscious effort. It becomes who you are. Shifting from reactivity to strategic action starts with recognizing the cost of living in a reactive mode. Every time you let a situation pull an immediate, unfiltered response from you, you are surrendering control of your decisions to the environment. Reactivity is fast, but often sloppy. It prioritizes speed over accuracy, emotion over reason, and immediate relief over long-term outcomes. While there are moments where quick reactions are necessary for safety, most of modern life does not require this level of urgency. Yet, because the brain's survival circuits evolved for a world of constant threats, they are biased toward action without reflection. This means that if you want to live intentionally, you must override that bias and train yourself to slow down just enough to make deliberate choices. The transition to strategic action is not about hesitating endlessly or becoming indecisive. It's about creating enough space between a stimulus and your response for you to consider what result you actually want. This space might be only a few seconds, but those seconds can make the difference between escalating a conflict and resolving it, between damaging a relationship and strengthening it, between making a decision you regret and making one you're proud of. The key is to recognize that your initial emotional impulse is often just the nervous system's first draft of a response, not the final one you're required to deliver. One way to begin this shift is to practice asking yourself a single question in moments of tension. What's my goal here? This simple prompt engages the prefrontal cortex, pulling your attention away from the emotional trigger and toward the bigger picture. If your goal is to win an argument, your response will look different than if your goal is to maintain trust. If your goal is to protect your peace, it will look different still. By identifying your goal before acting, you start to align your behavior with your values rather than your momentary feelings. This process also requires a clear understanding of what triggers you most. When you know your triggers, you can anticipate them and your responses. For example, if you know that interruptions at work tend to spike your irritation, you can decide ahead of time how you'll handle them, maybe with a specific phrase, a body language cue, or a temporary pause before answering. This pre-loading of decisions reduces the cognitive load in the moment and makes it easier to stay strategic rather than reactive. Strategic action also depends on emotional regulation because it's nearly impossible to think clearly when your body is flooded with stress hormones. This is where the real-time tools of breath, vision, and focus come into play. By regulating your state, you give your mind the conditions it needs to think ahead rather than react backward. Once you've calmed your physiology, you can assess the situation from a wider perspective. You might notice that the problem is smaller than it first appeared, or that you have multiple ways to address it, each with different consequences. This expanded awareness is the foundation of strategic thinking. Another critical factor is resisting the temptation to match other people's emotional intensity. When someone is angry, sarcastic, or agitated, it's easy to mirror their tone without realizing it. This mirroring is a deeply ingrained social behavior, but it often pulls you into reactive territory. Strategic action means holding your own emotional baseline regardless of someone else's. This might feel unnatural at first, as if you're not matching energy, but over time you'll see that maintaining your own center gives you the advantage. It allows you to lead the tone of the interaction rather than follow it. Strategic action also involves timing. Sometimes the best move is to act immediately. Other times, the best move is to wait. Waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. It means actively observing, gathering information, and letting emotions settle so that your next move is more precise. In high-stakes situations, this patience can prevent you from making irreversible mistakes. Learning to read the moment and decide whether to advance, hold, or withdraw is one of the most valuable skills you can develop in becoming unbothered. Over time, practicing this shift creates a noticeable change in how others perceive you. People begin to see you as composed, thoughtful, and intentional. You stop being the person who gets baited into every argument or distracted by every provocation, and instead become someone whose actions are hard to predict because they are not driven by predictable emotional reflexes. This unpredictability, paired with consistency in your values, makes you more respected and, in many cases, more influential. The internal benefits are even greater. When you consistently move from reactivity to strategy, you conserve enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy. You stop wasting effort on battles that don't matter. You make decisions that align with your long-term goals, which compounds into better outcomes in every area of your life. You begin to trust yourself more because you know you won't sabotage your own objectives by getting swept away in the heat of the moment. This self-trust is one of the deepest forms of confidence. None of this happens automatically. It requires repeated practice in real situations. You have to be willing to catch yourself in the middle of a reaction, pause, and choose differently. At first, you'll notice the opportunity only after the fact, realizing you could have handled it better. Over time, you'll start noticing in the moment and then before the moment. Eventually, you'll find yourself anticipating challenges and moving through them with a deliberate, almost effortless precision. This is when you know you've made the shift, not when you never feel the pull to react, but when you can feel it fully and still choose your move with clarity. Making this transition doesn't just change your behavior, it changes your relationship to life. You stop seeing yourself as someone who has to respond to everything right away and start seeing yourself as someone who decides when and how to respond based on what will serve you best. In that space, you gain freedom. Freedom from being yanked around by other people's moods, freedom from wasting energy on meaningless conflicts, and freedom to invest your attention where it matters most. This is the essence of training yourself to be unbothered, not a cold detachment from life, but a deliberate engagement with it on your terms,